Hello again YouTube, and welcome back to Just Get a Tesla. On today's video I want to ask a controversial question. Should Tesla open its supercharger network up to everybody? Now I already can hear some of you screaming, going, no, don't do that. The superchargers are ours. They're the thing that make us different and make us better and all of that. I hear you. There's a reason for asking the question, and that is there's been big news in America that Tesla has done a deal with Ford and General Motors now to be able to open the supercharger network and its proprietary connector up to other brands. So what that means is that if you buy a Ford F-150 Lightning in a few years, instead of having CCS1 on it, it's going to have the Tesla connector. Now, before we go a little bit further, most people watching this aren't in America, including myself, but I know we've got obviously a US audience as well. Hi. But let's just talk very briefly about different connector types, because most of the rest of the world has adopted relatively the same standard, which is a Type 2 connector for slow charging and then CCS2 for rapid, where you add two DC pins underneath the Type 2 AC. America hasn't done that because it's still stuck with the old Type 1 connector, which I think is 5 pins instead of 7 and only goes to 7 kilowatts usually instead of the 22 that Type 2 can go to. And that's basically because of where EVs first started, which is Japan. My first EV was a Nissan Leaf, and that had a Type 1 connector and of course CHAdeMO for rapid charging. Park CHAdeMO, we'll come back to that in a second. But both Outlanders that I had a Type 1. Type 1 basically is long since dead in the UK, but it appears not to be in America, where it's still around and has basically become the standard. So we all have CCS, but our CCS is CCS2 because most of the world went to the Type 2 charger. In the US it's still CCS1, and that isn't a particularly popular charger from what I read, for whatever reason. I don't know, non-standard, whatever. The other thing, of course, that everybody still had there for a while was CHAdeMO, which is this enormous Frankenstein connector thing that you almost have to heave onto connector to make the thing work. Again, that's dead in the UK pretty much. There's still some old Leafs who still have it. In America, the split between the different charger connectors is really quite a problem. So this deal that Tesla has done is really big, because what it's trying to do is to get the Tesla connector to become the new standard. And they've even done a wicked bit of rebranding. So instead of being a Tesla connector, no, it's now the North American charging system. See what they've done there? A nice little bit of sleight of hand. It's a bit like here in the UK, where as we were just getting going with nuclear power, we almost had a massive disaster. So Americans think 3 Mile Island, only we're a smaller country, so worse. So having managed to just about avert that, and it was absolutely by the skin of our teeth, what they decided to do was to rebrand. So instead of it being Windscale, where we had the nuclear disaster, let's call the site Sellafield. It might look like Windscale, but no. It's now the North American charging system. That is the trick that's been pulled. But if that unifies everybody onto one connector, then that will allow Tesla really to go to town by unveiling an enormous number of superchargers. Also, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but have I got this correct that in the US a lot of superchargers only go to 150 kilowatts, so they're version 2? And I asked that because that popped up in comments somewhere else, and I thought, most of ours are V3, so 250 kilowatts. So it's something that is going to affect us here in the UK as well. Not because of the different connector types, because, like I said, almost everybody is on CCS2, but the competing charger networks is still a thing. So last week I was on a trip down into England. I've already released part 1 of that trip, and the other 2 parts will follow. But I'd stopped at Grantham services on the A1, and there's already 16 Tesla superchargers there, but they're all the V2 ones. And next to it, to replace what had been previously a pair of 50 kilowatt chargers, there's now a shiny bank of 12 GridServe 350 kilowatt chargers. Once that station opens up at Grantham, as well as 16 Tesla chargers, I then got 12 of the GridServe ones as well. Fantastic. But the GridServe chargers are 69p a kilowatt hour. Tesla charged me 39p a kilowatt hour. How can I put this? 30p a kilowatt hour difference is massive. The point is that is one of very, very few good networks where they're, frankly, getting ahead of the curve. Because how can I put this? 350 kilowatt charging is far away into the future for almost everybody in the UK who has an EV. In terms of vehicles that can actually take 350 kilowatts, which is basically an 800 volt charging system, you've only got Hyundai Kia, so the Ioniq 5, the EV6, the Genesis GV60, and the Porsche Taycan. And I think that's it. Let me know in the comments if I've missed anything, but nothing else that I know of that's not that same drivetrain can actually take that level of charge. So 350 is way quicker than anybody can actually charge at, with very, very few exceptions. The scary bit, though, is just how slowly some brand new EVs with big batteries actually charge. So in the comments on one of my videos, somebody was talking about Skoda Enyaq, and you know what? That's a really, really decent electric SUV. It really is. But I was then looking at, well, how fast does the thing charge? And they just had an upgrade on that vehicle, so it now charges at 125 kilowatts, guys. Ooh, 125. That's slow. I mean, you know, my Model Y will charge at 250, and that's already behind the curve because we're now seeing this going to 350. So there's a whole load of vehicles out there that are slow on charging, and they are going to have a really poor charging experience a lot of the time trying to go onto public chargers where you've got to have a weird and wonderful app to make the thing work. I was at one yesterday in Aberdeen, okay, a slow charger, and ZapMap said it was on ChargePlay Scotland, and when I got there it was on what the hell is this? I can't be arsed downloading yet another app, and I could have dozens of them if I really wanted, and putting all my details in or whatever, just then to be able to take a charge at a price of I have no clue. That, for me, is bad. And there's a whole load of people out there who've gone and bought EVs and then say they're useless for long trips because when they're traveling around they've got to have 17 different apps. They're really slow when they get going, and that's if they get going because so many of them are broken. So this is the proposition, and this is where Tesla could actually do something positive. Instead of having two different operators on the same site with competing chargers, why not just install a wall of Tesla superchargers? Put 30 Tesla superchargers in and then make those open to everybody. So instead of having to go, well, is it this one or is it that one? You just make Tesla the standard and open that up to everybody with enough superchargers to be able to make it work, and replace the old Type 2 with the new Type 3 version 3 ones. And they've just done that at T-Bay. So don't say, oh, they won't, Tesla aren't going to replace their units and upgrade them. They've already just done so. The T-Bay site, which gets really busy, has just had 50% more chargers installed than the new now version 3. And what that means is that when it's busy, instead of splitting 150 kilowatts across the two stalls, so you only get 75, they're now V3, which means you're always going to get 250 max. So 50% more stalls, and they have, what, tripled the charge rate that you're going to get? That's an exceptional upgrade, and it just shows that Tesla are carrying on investing. Why can't they continue to do that? Get it so that Tesla isn't just, you know, the dominant EV brand, but actually then becomes the dominant EV charging setup. Because the reason why a lot of Tesla owners object to the idea of having other cars on our superchargers is they're ours. Well, we bought those. That's ours. You can't have them. But if there was piles of them everywhere, what would it matter? We'd still get it cheaper. You know, we're going to be getting that one in Grantham that I gave an example of. 39p a kilowatt hour. For the few sites that already have, as a trial, non-Teslas able to charge on them, they pay something like 50% more. So there's always going to be a price advantage. And that's no different to the other public charger networks, where if you buy a Hyundai, I think you get a discount on Ionity. So instead of having to give them the shirt off your back every time you charge up, you only have to give them a sleeve, right? So you're going to get that kind of discount anyway. But in America, it's now got to the point where everybody else has gone, you know what, Tesla, you've won, and we need to get on board the bus. And I just think there's a real opportunity to be able to do the same thing in the UK. Because I've said for a while that the free market with electric charging in the UK has failed, because you've got all of these different networks, all largely incompatible with each other, no real control over how they're done. There's quite a few where they're installed, but the power supply into them isn't there, or it's not going to be able to cope with it, or they're installed and then they break, and there's an argument about who's actually maintaining the damn things. You don't get that with Tesla. They're owned and they're operated and they're maintained by Tesla. So ultra reliable and ultra quick charging with a very simple app, this really could be the future. And it would encourage Tesla to fit a whole slug more superchargers, which is good for everybody. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? I just think, you know, while they're doing deals with people in America, let's start doing deals with other manufacturers in the UK. Not about the connector this time, but about charging. Okay, come on board with us, Ford. Come on board with us, Stellantis. We will allow you and your drivers to charge up our superchargers if you give us some money. And that we'll use that to build a whole load more superchargers everywhere you go. What do you think, guys? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe. See you very soon back here on Just Get a Tesla.